Hello. Good morning. So Gail, I want to make sure that this is not a class you already took.
No, I missed I went to past Sunday, but I missed the Sunday before.
Very cool. Very cool. I don't want to bore anybody.
I don't think you could.
I'm sure. Yeah. I bet if you asked my brother, he'd come up with a different outcome. Hi, Barbara.
I want you to know I missed you while you were gone.
Thank you. Thank you. It was, it's been a very different summer because, I was away and worked throughout the entire time I was there. It's like, it was just nice to have a family member around the house for a change. In Phoenix, they don't deal with hurricanes.
That's one thing they're lucky about.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Almost good noon.
I'm going to go get my water. I'll be right back.
Okay. We're going to wait another 2 or 3 minutes since it's the first time and give people a chance, and then in the future we'll stay on time. Want to make sure everybody has printed out the materials. All right. I hate putting them up on the screen because I can't see as many people then, and so I like to be able to see people. I also want to make sure that everyone knows that they didn't take this class a week and a half ago on a Sunday. This is about Unatana Tokef.
No.
Okay.
Is this the second class? Did I miss one?
This is actually the first class. I did.
Okay.
Right. So I did a Kol Nidre. Sunday mornings I've done 2. This is the first, the Unatana Tokef, and then next week I'll do, on Tuesday, I'll also do Kol Nidre at that point.
Oh, okay. That's the one I missed. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I'm printing it out right now.
Good, 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 good. All right.
Let me mute so you don't hear my printer.
Yeah. All right. So good morning, everybody. And thank you for joining us. We're obviously entering the high holiday period. And so the Liturgy of the High Holidays is a powerful series of prayers, and I want to go through over the next 4 weeks. This week it'll be Tuesday, and then the next 3 weeks it'll be Thursday at noon. Okay, today will be Unatana Tokef, then we'll do Kol Nidre, then we'll do the confessionals, Ashamnu and Al Chet, and the 4th week we'll do Ni'ilah. All right, so that's the plan for the overall. I hope everybody has printed out the materials, and we're just gonna get into it. That's the plan. All right, and so let's see, David, would you begin reading? David, begin reading, and then Gail, somewhere midway through, if you would pick up the first reading, A Merchant Suffered. We can't hear you, David. You need to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. A merchant suffered a disastrous loss when his business burned down, destroying all of his merchandise. He was uninsured and owed his supplier a huge sum of money. There was no way he could possibly raise enough money to pay the debt, and he became very depressed. His friends advised him to go to his supplier and tell him what had happened. Surely the supplier would be considerate and arrange reasonable terms for payment of the debt. The merchant accepted this advice and traveled to the city of the supplier. However, when he approached the supplier's office and realized that he was in such terrible straits that he had to beg for mercy, he was overcome with depression and began to cry. The supplier, hearing someone weeping, went to investigate. Seeing one of his best customers in tears, he invited him into his office. When the merchant calmed down, he told the supplier what had happened and asked if he could make some accommodation so he could repay the debt. The supplier was deeply moved by the merchant's plight. He said, "My friend, do not worry about repayment now. Of course, I will sharply reduce the debt. Furthermore, I will lend you 2,000 rubles and give you enough merchandise so that you can go into business again. Eventually, you will make enough profit to repay me." He encouraged and comforted the merchant and wished him well.
All right, Gail, why don't you continue? Go ahead.
Upon returning to the inn where he was lodging, the merchant was in high spirits and told some of the other guests about his good fortune. Hearing the story, one of the guests went to the supplier's office and began crying aloud. When the supplier asked him why he was crying, he said his business had failed and he was in need of funds.
Am I the only one who is frozen?
Huh? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Only the cantor's frozen.
Oh,
I'm gonna put it in the chat. Maybe he'll see that. Okay, I put it in there. Let's see. He's probably trying
you
to.
only one frozen canter.
Yeah, I think he's trying to fix it because he's gone.
Yeah.
He probably signed out and in again. Well, you and I are the only ones unmuted.
I wonder if I should continue reading or.
I don't know.
Well, why don't we wait and give him the courtesy of coming back in?
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds like a good plan.
I went down to the page and it was kind of what I would have expected in one of these stories. Though I didn't read the next page, but that up to that point.
It's about what you would expect.
Yeah. Yeah. How's Phyllis?
Phyllis is doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. How's your family doing?
Okay. I mean, everybody has jobs, which is great. You know, nobody, even Jerry, and he keeps saying he's going to retire, but maybe his 75th birthday in November.
Well, our daughter-in-law was in quarantine, but thank goodness she's out of it now and all tested negative.
Oh, good, good.
And we are, I think, going to be very lucky and just get rain and wind, maybe,
Well,
unless the reports have changed.
depends on which model forecast model you believe. The European model seems to think that we're going to get a direct hit.
Really? Okay.
The U.S. models seem to think it's going to come ashore just over by the Louisiana border.
Yeah.
And we'll get a glancing blow, just like you said.
My daughter likes Space City weather, and I haven't looked at that today to see what they're saying.
Space City weather's a good board.
Yeah, she said it was, you know, not scary. They don't try to scare people, or so. I'll have to look at it, but
Gee, I wonder what happened to the
I was
cancer.
praying for that we'd get. My friend who moved to Florida got missed by it. She's in Naples, and they were expecting it.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad they got missed.
That's Maria. So, yeah. Because she's the one who told me to watch for this stuff in the first place. I hadn't been paying attention. And she said, when we talked last Friday on the computer, she's like, there's 2 storms out there.
Oh, Buster's been looking at TV every morning and every evening and to see the process of what's going on.
Jerry too, but I mean,
No, I see
I wonder where he is. What
his
happened?
picture has changed on my computer screen.
I don't even see the Cantor's picture.
Well, I see an
I'll be back in a second.
Hi, the Zoom at the synagogue crashed, but we're trying to get back on.
Oh, Barbara, that's you.
Yeah, okay.
I recognized your voice.
So I'm gonna try and get the Cantor and get him to log back in. Okay?
I figured he was trying to do that, but
Yeah, he might be.
so.
Okay.
Are you at the synagogue?
I am. Hi, all right, everybody's on, so you can log back in. Okay, all right, otherwise come in Melissa's office. Okay, bye. Okay, he's trying. Sorry, everybody.
That's all right.
Okay, it happens. Not
I'm
as
an old IT guy. Those things happen.
Yeah.
Oh my
Apparently Zoom is having lots of problems too, so,
so many people are using it now. They
Yeah.
didn't use it before.
yep.
So I'm sure it's a stretch.
Well, unfortunately, I can't teach the class, but he's gonna, if he can't get it in his office, he's gonna come here. So hopefully he'll be back in a minute.
Well,
All right, here he comes.
I hear his voice.
Hello?
Yes, I'm in Melissa's office.
Yeah, it's not letting me on.
Okay, well, you're on here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Technology can be wonderful and a pain all at once.
Yep.
All right, well, I've moved offices. I think we left off, Gail was reading. Why don't you continue, go back to upon returning to the inn.
Okay. Upon returning to the inn where he was lodging, the merchant was in high spirits and told some of the other guests about his good fortune. Hearing the story, one of the guests went to the supplier's office and began crying aloud. When the supplier asked why he was crying, he said, His business had failed, and he was in need of funds to start up again. The supplier gave him a donation of 2 rubles. 2 rubles is all you're giving me, the man asked. Why, I know that you gave another merchant 2,000 rubles and a huge supply of merchandise. The supplier said, you fool. That merchant has been doing business with me for 20 years. During that time, I made considerable profit transacting with him. Now that he has fallen on bad times, it is only fair that I help him. But you? I have never seen you before. I've never profited a single cent from you. What right do you have to expect me to do for you what I did for him? The Maggid continued, when a Jew who has been going to shul to pray every day and has done his best to obey God's will makes his moral inventory before Rosh Hashanah and realizes how derelict he was in serving God properly, he comes to shul and tearfully asks God for forgiveness. God feels this person's broken heart and gladly forgives him, blessing him with a year of prosperity. He knows this merchant will do his utmost to repay the debt. But those who are negligent in observance of God's commandments and come to shul only once a year, they are much like the person who expects a handsome donation from the supplier with whom he never did any business. Is this not a chutzpah that they may unreasonably request from God?
Okay. So the parable here is suggesting that indeed, if you want to have relationship, it takes ongoing work. In a sense, we recognize that many of us have found our way to shul on a regular basis. Many of us have not. Many of us have done it on a daily level, some on a weekly level, some on a blue moon level, whatever we have found our way, or whether it's through mitzvot, or however we relate. But in a sense, it's not an issue of punishment if one doesn't do these things. It's an issue of, if you are more involved, it gets you in a place that solidifies the relationship in terms of making the ask. It's not necessarily all about God granting. It's about how our own attitudes are shifted in this process. I've got to let somebody in. Let me do this here. All right. Here we go. Okay. All right. So what I want to talk about, this is the start. That's just sort of an entree into the high holidays. The high holidays really, Judaism as a general rule, is a life-affirming religion. When we say something to the effect of l'chaim, it's not just a toast, it's a world view. It's a way of understanding what Judaism suggests, and that is that this life is the goal. We don't, unlike Christianity, we do not focus on the afterlife. For us, it is a matter of what we do here and now. We'll worry about the later when we get there. All right. The one exception to that concept, however, the one notable exception to the arm's length treatment of death is the period of the high holidays. Okay, yeah. All right. During this cluster of days, the tradition deliberately concentrates the individual's attention on death. Very deliberately. It's a period to concentrate on mortality and therefore the meaning of life. And the power is that we tap into these deep human feelings that we have about our own mortality as a stimulus to stop living life routinely. You know, in our COVID world right now, it's very easy. I feel like oftentimes we're living Groundhog Day, the movie. Every day is the same as the previous day. There's very little change. And one of the messages of the high holidays is to get out of that, to realize time is limited, and to appreciate the here, the now, and to do with it as much as we can. The ultimate goal is not to frighten anybody, but to stimulate growth and improvement. So what we're working towards, essentially, in the words of a recent author, is an examined life as opposed to an unexamined life. And from all these combined features, the concept of death, the concept of judgment, comes the central image that underlies the entire high holiday period, and that's the trial. Okay? We're asked at this moment in time to make a thorough assessment. In terms of my life and it's contributing to the balance, does the net effect of my actions tilt the scale towards life or towards death? If life ended now, would my life have been worthwhile? And what we've got is this dramatic sense of the shofar blasting, saying, ladies and gentlemen, the judge is sitting at the court on the bench. To wake up, notice, see. The shofar essentially, its message is to blast us literally out of lethargy. We have this gift that we're given of a filter. The filter essentially enables us to survive. We can function in our daily lives. We know about all the suffering going on in the world. We know about all the pain going on around us, and we're able to filter it out, or we'd be sitting in a corner overwhelmed by suffering. That filter keeps us surviving. On Rosh Hashanah, when the shofar blasts, it says, all right, in this moment, get rid of the filter. Now's the time to look around and see not only what's going on for you, but how you can make a difference in the lives of the people around us. An interesting side note is that the zodiac sign that corresponds to the month of Tishrei is the scale. All right. Many ancient cultures believed that the new year, which began with each season, was a time in which the order of the world is reestablished when the fates of people are determined for the coming year. And so with that, Rona, would you read reading number 2? This is taking from the text. You need to unmute.
On Rosh Hashanah, all the inhabitants of the world pass before God in judgment like a flock of sheep. All are judged on Rosh Hashanah, and the verdict is sealed on Yom Kippur.
Okay. This is taken right out of the paragraph Ushofar Gadol. Okay? Ma'avir tzono tachat shivto. All the flock is passing under the staff of God. Judaism introduces a loophole to the fact that on New Year's, the judgment is set. Judaism opens up a loophole that it's not completed until Yom Kippur. You get one more chance. One more chance to stop and talk to God and say, you know what, I blew it. Now, the good news is, and we'd all like to go to court with this as the case, according to tradition, we've got a judge who's sitting on the throne saying, I want you to succeed. I want to decide in your favor. All right? And so we approach the court and we make our cases, and until Yom Kippur is over, it is a time in which we're told prayer, penitence, tshuva, and charity help us change the decree. All right, that's what the end of this prayer says. So let's now begin the prayer itself. When I read these words a number of years ago, I found myself, in a sense, focusing on the issue of human vulnerability. It had to do with a number of personal things that were going on in my life at the time. I had lost my best friend to a disease that was so uncommon that the doctors were not even looking for it. And it's a disease who's so uncommon that it used to show up on the show House all the time, which was all about odd diseases. All right. Almost in the same period of time, my mom, who had had cancer 3 and 4 times, her 4th cancer showed up and she passed away in that same time. After 20 years of battling 4 cancers, she finally succumbed. And what I realized at that point is, in a way that you know in your head, but you don't know in your heart until it happens, is just how precarious life is, how fleeting it is. When everybody here has had that experience, and you realize that it's not a cognitive, it's somehow it's in here and it's different. How mindlessly we walk through our daily existence. We assume a level of predictability. We assume a pattern of events that will unfold, and yet we discover at the end of the day we are incredibly vulnerable and we're not in control. Courageous and strong as we want to believe we are, in the words of Yisker, we are like kechatzitz novel, like withered grass. We're out, we don't have control. And so the high holidays are imploring us, take notice. They're days of awe, of dread, of hope, of longing. It's once a year to be shaken. And the reality, according to this prayer, which we'll look in deeply, is that in all likelihood within our congregation, some of us next year will not be sitting in the sanctuary. That is the nature of life. Others of us will be diminished in some way, physically or otherwise. Whether or by fire or by water, in old age or in youth, frailty and death are part of our lives. The high holidays strip us. They strip us of the illusion that we have control. You know, I remember my mom saying in Yiddish, man plans and God laughs. At the end of the day, afar anachnu, we are dust. All right? It's hard to look around the congregation. I'll share with you a very funny story. It's funny, but it's also compelling. My first couple of years as a cantor in Nanuet, New York, my mom would come up for the high holidays. She lived about an hour away. She'd come up and spend the high holidays with me, and she would sit in the front row. They always reserved a seat for her. And inevitably, an older doctor and his wife would sit next to us each year, sit next to her each year. I thought I had seen a report. Again, I didn't know everybody in the congregation. It was my first year or two, and I was still learning who people were. And I thought I saw a note saying that the doctor had passed away. And I sent my mom a note saying, this is tragic. You know, I'm sorry. I know you kind of sit next to him. You kind of know a little bit about him, whatever. Imagine my shock when apparently I was wrong and he walked in and sat down next to my mom the following high holidays. Now, there's a humor to that, but the poignancy is, in some way, that is a truth. That someone in our vicinity is going to be missing. That is the reality of our lives. We don't know who, we don't know when, all right? We do know that at some point it's going to claim us. And unlike most of our prayers, which may hint at this, Unatana Tokef confronts this mortality with the poetic force of a 2x4. It hits you in the head and says, notice this. This is truth, this is reality. It's a hammer, all right? You've got to give up your sense of self-sufficiency, your sense of status, and your immunity, because things are going to happen. Throughout the book of Samuel, we see in King David a man filled with this zest for life. He dances when the Torah is brought to Jerusalem. Okay? And yet, when we see the book open, the book of Kings open, David's an old man. He's shivering in his bed. He can't even keep himself warm. And the first verse of the book says, King David was now old, advanced in years. One chapter later, the Bible says David is dying. And the rabbis notice a significant difference in the two verses. When he's old, he's called King David. When he's dying, he's David. Like David, we can't hide behind power and position and title. At death, we have no titles. We don't face death as a king, a rabbi, an employee, or even a parent. We face it as individual souls. Death brings us face to face with who we are. And the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, are designed to force us to encounter that and to ask the big question, if my life ended now, would it have been worthwhile? A little background on this specific prayer. Unatana Tokef became a highlight of the high holiday liturgy ever since the 13th century, being associated with a legend of a famous rabbi, this Amnon of Mainz. Many of us recall this story from growing up. I remember every year my rabbi would tell the story before we did this prayer. In the words, if the words and the melody and the hush in the room are not enough to command our attention, the legend that is associated with it, which I'll share with you in a second, certainly will grab your attention. There are various sources that differ slightly, but here is the synopsis of the tale, and I'm going to tell you, it's not for the lighthearted. Sandy, would you begin reading reading number 3?
Okay.
Rabbi Amnon.
Rabbi Amnon is approached by the local bishop who asks him to convert. He puts the bishop off, saying he will think about it and return word in 3 days. Almost immediately, however, consumed with remorse for even suggesting that he might apostatize, he refuses to appear when the 3 days are over. Perturbed by the slight, the bishop dispatches soldiers to bring him to the castle by force. When asked why he failed to appear of his own free will, Amnon explains that he should never have promised to come in the first place. Even saying he would is a grievous enough sin to deserve punishment, which he is perfectly willing, even anxious, to undergo. Since it is his tongue that sinned, his tongue should be cut from his mouth. The bishop, however, maintains that the sin was performed by Amnon's feet, which he did not use to carry him to the palace as he had promised. He thereupon orders that Amnon's toes and fingers be hacked off. What is then left of Amnon is then carried on a knight's shield back to the Jewish quarter. When Rosh Hashanah next arrives, Amnon asks to be delivered to the synagogue, where he is placed next to the prayer leader alongside his amputated parts. As the leader is about to recite the Kedusha, the prayer specifying God's sanctity, Amnon asks him to wait a minute while he, Amnon, sanctifies God's name. As so, let holiness rise up to you, he begins, after which he recites Sunatan Atoka, a prayer no one has ever heard before. When he finishes, he disappears from before the congregation, somehow taken by God from this world. 3 days later, he reappears in a dream to Rabbi Kalonimus ben Meshulam to teach him the prayer and instruct him to publicize it far and wide throughout the diaspora.
Okay. So the question, this is a legend. What do we make of such a story? It could be absolutely true, but if so, it'd be rather strange because this rabbi is not mentioned in any other text. You would think that he would show up somewhere in Ashkenazic writings, and he doesn't. It seems that what we have is a text that's composed of bits and pieces of other tales, in a sense, a combination of folk motifs. What it likely is, all right, is a mortality tale, a reflection of a difficult period in Jewish history when persecution was the order of the day and Jews were considering converting, abandoning Judaism to save themselves and their children. It is likely that this was written in response to the Crusades. That is the likely outcome. And although it doesn't reflect one person's story, in a sense, it reflects every person's story. Whether or not this is actual fact, it is fact in truth in the larger picture. It's taken on new energy following the Holocaust. Okay, for sure, all the more so. And so certainly in my growing up years, this was being spouted from the bima a lot because these are the issues. So what I want to do now is I want to read the actual prayer. So Rona, I'm going to ask you to begin, and then about halfway through, Jerry, if you would pick up from there. You need to unmute. Rona, you need to unmute. You're still muted.
Okay, so
There you go.
is it reading?
Let us speak. Let us speak.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, let us speak of the sacred power of this day, profound and awe-inspiring. On it, your sovereignty is celebrated, and your throne, from which your rule is in truth, you rule in truth, is established with love. Sorry. Truly, you are judge and prosecutor, expert and witness, completing the indictment, bringing the case, and enumerating the counts. You recall all this is forgotten, and will open the book of remembrance, which speaks for itself, for our own hands have signed the page. The great shofar will be sounded, and the still small voice will be heard. Angels will be alarmed, seized with fear and trembling, declaring, this very day is the day of judgment, for even the hosts of heaven are judged. No one is innocent of your sight. All that lives on earth will pass before you like a flock of sheep. As a shepherd examines the flock, making each sheep pass under the staff, so you will review and number and count, judging each living being, determining the fate of everything in creation, inscribing their destiny.
All right, Jerry?
On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and the fast of atonement it is sealed. How many will pass on, and how many will be born? Who will live and who will die? Who will live a long life, and who will come to an untimely end? Who will perish by fire, and who by water? Who by sword, and who by beast? Who by hunger, and who by thirst? Who by earthquake, and who by plague? Who will be strangled, and who will be stoned? Who will be at peace, and who will be troubled? Who will be serene, and who will be disturbed? Who will be tranquil, and who will be tormented? Who will be impoverished, and who will be enriched? Who will be brought low, and who will be raised up?
All right.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, keep going, but.
and Tzedakah have the power to transform the harshness of our destiny.
Okay. This is what we chant. I didn't make this up. These are the words of the liturgy. This is what we're being confronted with. Read literally, Unatana Tokef portrays God as standing in judgment upon us, and by Yom Kippur, God has decided who will live, who will die, and how they will die as well. I might be scheduled for terminal cancer next November, and somebody else might be scheduled for a car crash 2 weeks later. Of course, until Yom Kippur, the decree is only provisional. If by then we've changed our ways, we've prayed hard enough and performed actions of righteousness, we might be able to avert the decree. Do the right thing before the final gavel falls, and neither the cancer nor the car crash will occur. Anybody have a response to that? Feel free to unmute and share your thoughts.
It's kind of too much like magical thinking for, I think, a lot of us in modern society. You know,
Okay.
it's just giving God an overwhelming power over us, and whether we believe whatever we believe about God, it's a stretch for me. I mean,
Okay.
not that I shouldn't do these things and be thinking about it, but the actual that it's going to be written down and I can't change it the rest of the year. That's like a stretch for me.
Anybody else?
It brings to my mind the expression that it's the sheriff, you know. We're here, we're going to die at a certain time. God knows when that is. When your time is up, your time is up.
All right, but this is suggesting a causality between our actions and the outcomes. All right, so I'm going to Rhoda, I think I'm going to say it even stronger than you said. Okay,
Yeah,
I find this offensive.
yeah,
Right, life doesn't really work that way. It's hard to understand this divine puppet master who was making a list of all, all the grisly ways that his children might die. It's almost blasphemous in a time of terrorism against the innocent and a century following the Holocaust. This is a statement that my mom, who died at 75, had 74 years where she merited living, and the 75th year, boy, did she have a bad year. All right, I don't buy it. It's problematic. I'm not going to answer this right now, but I want you to hear that I do find it problematic. Let's take a closer look at some of the text within here. Okay, I want to start with text 2. And it's just very brief, so I'm going to read it. It says, "And you will remember everything
respond
that
to
has
that
been
before you go on?
forgotten, and you will open the book of memories. Nothing in our lives remains secret. Secrets have a way of seeping through the cracks. We all know this. Somebody finds out one way or another. Judaism says you put a mezuzah on every door in your house because you just remind yourself, doesn't matter where you go, God sees what you're doing. You could recess to the back room in your house and God's still watching. It lies and half-truths ultimately are going to fail. Better, we should live our lives assuming that all of our deeds, our phone calls, our emails, our text messages, our financial transactions are known, that they're recorded, they're remembered, and they're on display. If you live your life like that, now none of us can do that all the time, but if you live your life like that, you remember that everything is being recorded. That's the message of V'tizkor kol hanishkachot v'tiftach et sefer hazikaron. Remember, everything has been forgotten, will be recorded in the book of memories. Your actions are being recorded. Live life as if that were the case. Then it says, "Ume'alav yikareh v'chotam yad kol adam bo," and it will be read from everyone's signature. Talking about the book of life, everyone's signature is to be found within the text. We write the stories of our lives. This is derived from a midrash that states that at the time we depart this world, God will present us with a full record of our wrongdoings, and our job at that point is to sign off and say, yep, that's the way it was, put your name on it. And the authors took that midrash and transferred it to the Unatan Tokef and the events of the high holidays. Each of us signs our name each year, in a sense. We take responsibility. God is referred to as the Chotev v'Chotem, the writer and the sealer, but God is not does not have sole authorship. Chotam Yad Kol Adam Bo, everyone's signature is also recorded in that book. So you are writing and you are signing and you are sealing the actions. That's the implication of the poetic message of this text. The second paragraph then continues on. Uf shofar gadol yitaka, great shofar is sounded, b'kol demama daka, and a small, thin whisper of sound will be heard. This is based on a story in the Bible where the wind passes and Elijah realizes that God is not in the wind, and then there's an earthquake, God's not there. He hears God in the small sound of life. Revelation can come to us when we listen to Beethoven's Ode to Joy. It can come to us through Chazanut, if you really love it. It comes to us through Louis Armstrong's trumpet. When you see the Mount Rainier, I know I had that experience when I saw the Smoky Mountains. But Revelation also shows up in less dramatic ways, in the slow movements, in the call of a bird, in the cry of a baby, and sometimes even in the silence of a corpse. Revelation can be found in big moments, but more often it's found in the small moments. Shofar gadol yitaka, the loud shofar is blasting. B'kol demama daka, but all we're hearing, we're really finding God in many of the small moments. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I want to open up the discussion. Okay. Reading 7, just take a look at reading 7. This is the text from Kings. It says, "And lo, the Lord passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by the power of the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a thin whisper of a sound." All right, and then we go to the last paragraph, and we all sing, "B'Rosh Hashanah yikatevu." We're singing on Rosh Hashanah. It's going to be written down. On Yom Kippur, it'll be sealed. But at the end, Tshuva, Tfilah, and Tzedakah help the harshness of the decree pass. What could be more final than a diagnostic test, a divorce decree, a death certificate, and yet this may not be, we're talking about something that may not be a final decree. There was an earlier version to this, to the ending line, which said that prayer, repentance, and tzedakah, mevatilin, nullify the decree.
Yeah.
All right, mevatilin. But that version didn't survive. The rabbis simply couldn't stomach the reality of it. That's just not the way the world works. All right. You don't get a good life and granted a long life because you do good deeds. So they settled on what we have now, that it's ma'avirin. It helps pass it in a sense. It changes maybe an angle. It changes the harshness. Something about it is changed, but it's not nullified. It's not torn up. It's not annulled. It's not canceled, averted. It's tempered. All right. It may not cure a disease and restore a loved one, but it may attract people to our sickbed or to our house of mourning who help us through moments of difficulty. In his classic book on the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that while we may not be able to decide the conditions of our existence, what we do possess is the freedom to reinterpret those conditions, and we have the freedom to choose our responses to them. There are people who melt at the slightest disappointment or setback, and there are those who've suffered immeasurably and yet maintain a sense of optimism and hope. We choose whether to find new meaning in tragic moments or to remain stuck. We choose whether to find healing in our homes or to hunker down in self-justification and denial. What is important is we have the ability to choose. And when it comes to the book of our lives, God is Choteh v'Chotem. He is the writer and the sealer, but our Chotem Yad, our Chotam Yad rather, is on every page. We have the ability to be the co-authors, not only of the actions, but our responses to it. All right, so I want to finish up with comments on this prayer in general, Unatana Tokev, and I want to listen to other people first, and then I'll give you where I think we are. All right, comments on this prayer and the high holiday, whole judgment period. Yes, David.
I was a little bit surprised at the intensity of your comment earlier about where you actually used the word blasphemy in talking about Unatana Tokef.
Yeah.
And well, I can understand that if you read the prayer and try to take all of the words of it literally.
Yeah.
But I think what's really going on is that Teshuvah is an end of itself. It makes you feel good. It's worthy. And whether it leads to a personal reward for you or not, it's a good thing.
I buy that fully. You kind of summarized what I was going to say at the end. I would say to you, on a literal level, this prayer is offensive. It's not true. However, the ultimate, as a fable, as a legend, if we live our lives as if it were true, even though we know it's not, if we live our lives as if it were true, how much better a place would the world be?
Amen.
Okay? That's the key to what's going on here. I truly don't believe that I'm sitting in a court, and based on how I pray and whether or not I do tshuva, God is declaring, yeah, your cancer diagnosis is going to be changed this year. I don't believe that. I do believe that if I live my life as if on some esoteric level that were the case, I'm going to make a difference in the world.
So you're saying it's a guide to us more than it is a literal. It's a guide to us how to live our days rather than a literal. God is sitting up there with the book.
Yeah. Yes. I don't believe that there's the book of life. We sing Zachrenu, remember us in the book of to life, in the book of life. Write us in the book of life. It's constantly echoed throughout the service, but it is meant to be a legend. It is meant to be a myth. Now, myth doesn't make it untrue because its essence is true. Its literalness is not. Any other thoughts?
I have a question.
Go
So
ahead.
you said the rabbis switched it from nullify.
Mhm.
I remember nullify. So when was the translation or the wording switched?
Very within about a century of when it was written. So we're talking and we think it was written sometime in the 13th century. So it's not something Joe, the recent rabbi, did.
I must have just heard somebody use the word nullify then. It's
Yeah.
not actually,
I've seen the
No,
word in,
the
I've
word
seen the word in
literally is
translations.
ma'avir. Over means to pass. Ma'avir means to cause to pass.
okay,
All right. Ivri, the word for a Hebrew comes from the same root that they passed the ones over, they cross over the river. All right. It is someone who causes something to pass, to move. All right. And so that it does not even suggest nullify.
okay. So David, you've heard that said too?
No, what I was going to say is I've seen translations where the word nullify is used.
Yeah, yeah.
I have too.
I must have-
The old Moxer used to say that.
Yes.
That's why, yeah, because I knew.
And the rabbis, I remember my rabbi every year getting up and saying, by the way, that's not what it says.
Okay. I knew I couldn't be crazy because that's like, wait a minute.
No, yeah, it was in the Silverman Moxer.
Okay, yeah, and I
Yeah.
have that one probably sitting on a shelf somewhere.
I think there was a star next to it and some kind of comment at the bottom. I think. It's been a long time, so I believe there was. But it does definitely, there's no sense of nullifying the word ma'avirim.
Okay. So I do think this is a hard, we all love, well, I don't know if love's the right word, but we're so, this is so part of us
Mhm.
every year to be doing this. But I don't think most of us think of it as a literal. Unless you're a little kid growing up, maybe, and nobody's taken time to, because there's certain stages in your life where, yes, that's what you might think of. And I still might see that picture, but I don't believe it.
So yeah, again, we in the previous course, I talked about reward and punishment. And one of the ways we've made sense of this is that the punishment or reward could come in the afterlife. So we might, in that model, we still believe in it. We just believe that the punishment or reward is delayed. I'm not sure even by that model.
Yeah, that would be hard for me.
All right, thank you all. Just so you know, I'm doing the same class. This class I'm doing tonight again. Next week, I'll be doing Tuesday night, Kol Nidre, Thursday noon, Kol Nidre. All right, so it's the same class. I'm offering it several times. So, all right, you're welcome to join us at any of those. And I'm glad you were here. I bet it's been a tough morning in a lot of ways, and this is one of the most fulfilling things I do. And so I appreciate your opportunity to sort of uplift me in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy the day.
Thank you. Thank you.
One other comment I was going to say is that at first when I heard Leonard Cohen's song and I was listening to it, I'm like, this is what Leonard Cohen, he wrote from what he grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has a song that is his version of it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.